So if you collect Fiesta, which I assume many of you do, so here's an image of Mark Gonzalez, and so I'm going to talk about him a bit. I'm not going to introduce him particularly, other than he's one of the foremost authorities on Homer Laughlin China and Fiesta. But you either know him so well, or I'm going to tell you that he doesn't do Zoom programming and he doesn't do conference calls. So imagine how fraught this whole setup was with getting him to do a Zoom presentation for us. So what we finally agreed on, because everyone recommended him and we wanted him to present something. So we asked him finally, if he wasn't going to do a live Zoom, if he would record just for us a special tour of the Fiesta Tableware Company showroom and museum, and which he did, which I'm just going to tell you, you'll enjoy it. So we've frozen Mark's face here because he isn't going to be live with us. And so then you might guess the next logical question is, well, how's he going to do the question and answer part at the end? Well, we thought about that too. And since he wouldn't do Zoom and he's not doing a conference call, we watched the video, Bill and I did, and we asked him how many questions? I think we asked him 11 or 12 what we thought were worthy questions, and you can be the judge of that in a moment. But anyway, so then I asked him to answer these questions, and so he did another recording. But it's really charming, and he shows you everything, and it's just like he's in the room with us. However, because of that, I asked him also if he would let me provide his personal email to everyone so that when you have a question that we didn't ask him, that you can email him. And he's on the road today and tomorrow, and so he's not going to answer you immediately, but he will personally answer your email questions about whatever it is that you saw this evening. And you can reach him that way. So kind of without further ado, and without introducing Mark Gonzalez any more than I have already, so I'm turning the program over to Mark Gonzalez and his tour of the Fiesta Tableware Company's showroom and museum. So take it away, Mark.
I'm here at the Outlet Museum at the Fiesta Tableware Company in Newell, West Virginia. And today we're going to look at some pieces of Fiesta made by the factory from 1936 to 1969. But I wanted to pan around and show you a little bit of the museum and what's on display. If you're ever in the area and do a factory tour here, the museum is the last stop. And you will see pieces made by the Homer Laughlin China Company, by Hall China, some pieces from the 1800s, all the way up till today. But for now, we're going to focus on Fiesta. And I've pulled some pieces from the showcase. And one of the aspects of Fiesta that draws collectors, I mean, there are several: the design, the value, the availability, but color has to be number one. So we're going to look at the colors. And there were 11 of them in the vintage Fiesta line. It was introduced in 1936, and there were 5 glazes. First was Fiesta Red, Blue, sometimes called Cobalt, Green, although sometimes called light green or original green in some cases, and this is done to differentiate from the greens that come later. Yellow, and Old Ivory. So I want to come back here to Fiesta Red for a moment, because newcomers will look at this and say, well, that doesn't look like red, that looks like orange. But red was a marketable color in the 1930s and 1940s. But the problem is red is very temperamental. It does not fire easily. This particular glaze has uranium oxide in it. And so if you put this next to a Geiger counter, it's going to go off. There have been more than one laboratory studies that determine that this glaze is perfectly safe. It was, as I said, a very temperamental color. All reds are, even this orange-red glaze. And this is what happens when it's fired too high. And the factory dubbed this kiln trash. So you get this burn effect going on it. Sometimes you'll find a piece that's completely brown, that's all burned up, but this is a partial burn. So I don't know if you can tell in the video or not, but that has somewhat of a glossy look to it whereas this one has more of a matte texture. So again, those first 5 colors, Fiesta Red, Blue, Green or Light Green, Yellow, and Old Ivory. Turquoise was added in 1937, almost a year and a half after the introduction. And so you have these 6 glazes that a lot of collectors call the original 6. There was another one that was under serious consideration. That's this one. It's called Rose Ebony. Now, Rose Ebony, you can sometimes find a piece of Fiesta in Rose Ebony. We don't have any here to show, but we do have this piece that was modeled by Frederick Reed in 1936. I'm somewhat glad that this didn't go into production. It's rather hard to photograph. Sometimes it looks red, sometimes it looks purple, sometimes it looks brown. It's very similar to a glaze that was introduced later on in the contemporary line called Heather. Some collectors called this red grape before the Rose Ebony name was known, but that almost became a Fiesta glaze at the same time as turquoise. Now in 1943, Fiesta Red was discontinued. The government seized control of uranium, and so they could not make this glaze anymore. So from 1943 to 1951, there were only 5 colors. The ones you see here: Old Ivory, Turquoise, Green, Yellow, and Blue. In 1951, the Blue, the Green, and the Old Ivory were discontinued. So you still have Yellow and Turquoise. And they added 4 more to it, to again have 6 colors. They are Chartreuse, Rose, Forest Green, and Gray. So those are your 6 colors. These added 4 were meant to harmonize with the ones that were left over, the turquoise and yellow. Those last until 1959, and since these were only made from 51 to 59, these 4 colors are commonly called the 50s colors. So, in 59, those are discontinued. Turquoise and yellow remain. And Fiesta Red is brought back. And these 3 are joined with medium green. Now, when this was introduced, it was just called green. But it was made from 59 to 69. And even though it was made for 10 years, Fiesta was on its way out. So it wasn't as mass-produced as it was in the previous years. So medium green is going to be more difficult to find and more valuable as a result. So again, from 59 to 69, you have these 4 colors: turquoise, yellow, Fiesta Red, and this medium green. Some advertisements call it Kelly green. We're going to show these greens together. So here's that original green or light green. And there's that medium green. You can see the difference. These are the 2 that are commonly confused with one another. Although when you see them side by side, it's pretty obvious. There's that burned up Fiesta Red. All right, and there's Chartreuse. And here's Forest. So those are your 4 vintage greens. Now, in 1969, Fiesta is restyled and becomes Fiesta Ironstone. So there is a 5th green. It's called Turf Green, but we're not going to go over that one today. So that's a quick look at the colors of vintage Fiesta. The other aspect of Fiesta that makes it so special is the style and its design. A Fiesta was designed by Frederick Reed, who was an English potter who came to the United States. He was born in 1880. He died in 1942. He worked at Roseville Pottery. He worked at the American Encaustic Tile Company. He had his own studio pottery. He understood form. He understood glazes. He wrote numerous articles about different glazes, although he didn't develop these Fiesta glazes himself. There was an engineer here called, or his name was Albert Bleninger, who worked closely with Reed to develop these colors that could harmonize together. So when a piece is modeled, or a line of dinnerware is modeled, I should say, the first piece is almost always a 9-inch plate. And then once the 9-inch plate is approved, then it goes into production. And in the case of Fiesta, they made the 9-inch plate and there were no revisions, there was nothing that needed to be done or changed, and so it went into production, and that became the basis for the rest of the line. There's also usually a piece of hollowware or some other item that also dictates how the line should look, and the second piece was the teacup. Now the teacup has this nice ring handle. There were 3 other alternates under consideration. I have 2 of them out here. So these are the actual original models. So you see there's a little more ornamentation to this one than the one that went into production. And here's another model. Unfortunately, it's been broken, but it's been glued back together, so it's a solid ring handle. There's also an oval ring handle that I don't have out today, but there were 4 under consideration, and this is the one that won out. And when you look at Fiesta, a lot of people like to say, well, it's Art Deco. Well, that's true. There are Art Deco elements to Fiesta, but it has more of a streamlined shape. It's rather fluid, especially if you look at something like the sauce boat or the disc pitcher. It's rather interesting about the disc pitcher. It wasn't part of the original assortment in 1936. It was added in 38, but it's become rather iconic of the line. It almost looks like the bullet trains, or has the style of the appliances, or like a radio or something of the late 1930s that has that streamlined style to it. Before we look at any of these shapes in detail, I want to show you this piece. So this is the original drawing. This is Frederick Reed's handwriting at the bottom. It says sketch for mold marks, and it says Fiesta HLC USA. So he developed that back stamp that we see so many times, are the mold marks in 1936. We'll look at an example on this ice pitcher, and you can see his drawing versus an actual mold mark. Fiesta HLC USA. And there are variations of this, but this is the original one. And then they added the genuine to the top for the back stamp, which is under the glaze. And we can look at that too. So what's interesting about Fiesta compared to other dinnerware lines, there's so many pieces. There are I think there's roughly 60 different pieces in the assortment. You look at other dinnerware lines at this time, and there's about 20 to 30 items in the assortment. But there are a lot of rather unusual pieces that force this line to become more of an artware line. So it's like a combination of tableware and artware, especially when you consider there are 4 styles or 4 sizes of vases. We'll move this one out of the way for a moment. So here we have 3 flower vases. Well, there's the 12-inch, which is the large, the 10-inch, and the 8-inch. There's also a bud vase. So it is extremely unusual for any line of dinnerware to have a vase in its assortment, and Fiesta happens to have 4 of them. Again, we see that Fiesta HLC USA marking. In the contemporary line, the medium vase, which is the 10-inch version, is a standard item. The 8-inch vase is also made. It's called the small vase. The large one, however, is not. That's your 12-inch vase. Bud vase was also part of the contemporary line. And if you were to look at the old molds for this, it doesn't say bud vase. It actually says stem vase. But in price list and everything, it's called a bud vase. We also have the sauce boat, which we just saw a moment ago, again with that streamlined design. This is a variation of the marking. It still has that Fiesta, but instead of HLC USA at the bottom, it says Made in USA with a HLC logo up top. Of course, that's Fiesta Red. not one, but two styles of candle holders. So again, we're seeing some unusual pieces in this line. I can't think of very many other shapes that had candle holders. There was Harlequin by Homer Laughlin that had candlestick holders. There's Plymouth by TS&T that had candlestick holders. The Rainbow by W.S. George. Just a couple off the top of my head that I can think of. Knowles, Yorktown had candlesticks, but that's about it. It's just not standard. But we have two styles here. This is the bulb type. There's your Fiesta HLC USA. This is in turquoise. And the tripods. Carafe, again, another unusual piece to have in a line of dinnerware. This one's sort of a prototype in that it doesn't have its cork seal. Rather unusual glaze effect going on in there. It wasn't fully glazed when it was dipped. Coffee pot. You wouldn't think that this is an unusual piece to have in dinnerware. But in the 1930s it is. There weren't very many lines that had a coffee pot. Demi-tasse pots, yes. But a coffee pot, no. In fact, it's not until you get into the late 1940s that a coffee pot becomes pretty standard in dinnerware assortments. But for Fiesta, this is actually the first time we see a full-size coffee pot in a line of dinnerware here made at the factory. There's also a demi-tasse coffee pot. We'll look at that in a moment. Covered sugar. And the casserole, you look at these handles on the bodies and you can see that streamlined movement going on again. Of course, that's chartreuse and forest green. We have a little note in here, Sheila for museum. I'm not sure who Sheila is, so we're going to put that off to the side. And there's the Fiesta marking underneath. But that's your forest green. It almost looks like medium green in this screen, but it is forest. Ashtray, another unusual piece to have in the assortment. This is an early version with the rings on the bottom. They later removed those rings and make room for a back stamp, but that's turquoise. This was made in all 11 colors. That's one thing to mention about these accessory items. By the time you get to 1946, a lot of them are discontinued. So many pieces only have like a 10-year run and made only in those first 6 glazes. So if you look at something like, let's say this piece, a 12-inch flower vase, that's going to be much more desirable than, let's say, a 9-inch plate or a 9-inch plate in cobalt or dark blue, simply because this was not made as long. Same thing for this one in turquoise. A little bit different with turquoise because turquoise was added in 1937. So if we have, let's say, this one, these are both 8-inch vases, one in yellow, one in turquoise. But the yellow one had a big head start because when a line of dinnerware is introduced, it undergoes a rather big mass production at first, and then it just starts to taper off. So by the time turquoise was introduced, Fiesta was starting to taper off in its production. So a turquoise vase, even though they were discontinued at the same time, I believe 1946, the turquoise vase is going to be a little more difficult to find than yellow or the other colors like green, blue, old ivory, and red. So there are a lot of all these ins and outs to collecting Fiesta. You have to know when things were discontinued, when they were introduced. It goes for the items, it goes for the glazes. So the best bet, if you're going to get into Fiesta, is to get a good collector book or find a good reference online, like a good Facebook group that can help you. It doesn't take very long to figure it all out, but there are all these little ins and outs to collecting Fiesta, simply because there are so many items and so many colors, and not everything was made all at once. And so you have these items that are worth more than others, or easier to find than others. 2-pint jug in Fiesta Red. This was made in 5 sizes, but only the largest size went into production. Sometimes you'll see a number 5 at the top to indicate its size. The 11-inch fruit bowl, or I think it's 11 3/4-inch fruit bowl, originally meant to go with another line called Kitchen Craft. But then they just added some inside rings and added it to the Fiesta assortment. This is another piece that was gone by 1946. Nested bowls. Again, we're seeing another set of items that just wasn't typical in dinnerware. But for Fiesta, we're now getting into a kitchenware vibe with nested bowls. There were 7 sizes. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them here. They were numbered on the bottom. This one's number 1. These were also gone by 1946, so you will find these in the first 6 colors only. And I'm going to take the ivory one out. Oh, talking about ins and outs of collecting, the initial ones had rings on the inside bottom, later ones did not. So again, all these little things make it fun to collect, to learn all these. This is a number 4 bowl, the number 4 nested bowl. So we're going to go over here to the case, since I have it open. We're going to do a little detour real quick first. Let's go over here, because I pulled these out. Those of you who collect Harlequin, or know of Harlequin, you know of the Harlequin animals that were made in the Harlequin glazes for Woolworths in the late 1930s and very early 1940s. Well, these are in Fiesta glazes, so these are all experimental. So we have the lamb in blue and turquoise, the donkey in turquoise, cats in blue and turquoise, ducks, 2 in light green, 1 in blue, 1 in turquoise, some fish in light green and dark blue. And then some first style penguins. These didn't go into production, but this was the initial design for the penguin. And if we look at the bottom, they don't sit very well. They tend to wobble. So what they did is they made them with larger feet. And then when they made the large feet, they had to make the head large. So if you have one of these Harlequin animals with penguins, it's going to be different from this one. It's going to have the large feet, which stabilize it, and then, of course, the corresponding larger head. But these are the original styles. But I thought those might be fun to look at if you're into Harlequin and these Harlequin animals. So, getting back to Fiesta, we're going to look at a couple pieces in the case. This is a cracked ice bowl. So this is experimental, and this is the only one known to exist in old ivory. I'm going to put this nested bowl beside it so you can see a comparison. Slightly different profile, but again, cracked ice bowl, the only one known. This is a piece from the 1800s, 1880s. It's marked premium stone china, and it was donated to the factory so it could be on display so everybody could see it. But it's the hen on the nest. And I don't know if you can see, there's a little chick coming out from the bottom there, and there's an egg in the back. So it's like a casserole. I'll just lift it up so you can see the base. This is not Fiesta, but I thought it'd be fun to show. It's a little donut cup and saucer. So you put your donut on there, and you use this to dunk it. It's got a little embossed donut. And Fiesta turquoise dunking cup didn't go into production, but this is something that was designed by Frederick Reed for special order, but it just never went through. In the back is a Fiesta plate from the 1960s. So this was made about the same time as a line called Fiesta Casuals. So this is an underglaze spray, or they used a stencil spray. So it's in green and yellow, and then it gets a clear glaze. We'll move over here. There's the footed salad bowl. That's not experimental. Forgive the dust. It gets very dusty in this pottery. You wipe the dust off and it just comes right back. But that was a standard item made in the first 6 colors. This is a Fiesta compartment plate. So it was made with a white body and then given the underglaze Blue Willow transfer. Blue Willow was a standard line made here for many years. But this, I believe, was made for Woolworths. However, it didn't go into production, so the only piece that is known to exist is the sample piece, which is the compartment plate. We're going to take it out and get a closer look at this. And we look at the back, and that's how the 12-inch compartment plates. There were two sizes of compartment plates for Fiesta. This is the larger of the two. I'm going to set this down on the case. Okay. Medium teapot in blue. There were two sizes of teapots. This one has the sort of a gumdrop finial. And I'd mentioned the demi-tasse pot. There's one. That's actually Harlequin Yellow. Harlequin Yellow, which is another line that was made for Woolworths, is a little bit brighter yellow. I don't know if it's going to show up. Let's compare it and see. I'll grab a piece of Fiesta Yellow. So Fiesta Yellow is a little bit darker and Harlequin Yellow is brighter. This is an experimental piece. The individual teapot, it's also called a demi-tasse pot prototype. And it is very similar to this in that the lids are interchangeable and the stick handles are the same. Unfortunately, this one that's glazed in old ivory, the lid is out of round, and I've tried 3 different lids in old ivory. None of them fit, but this yellow one does. So maybe someday we'll be able to find a nice old ivory lid to fit that one. We can look at the marking on this one. There are at least 3 of these known to exist. One went up for auction and brought $20,000. So when you get into these rare and experimental pieces, the prices can go pretty high. Another piece I wanted to show is this one. It's an experimental. It's a footed French casserole. So French casseroles were made, introduced in 1940 to boost the sales. The sales of Fiesta started to go down in 1939, and so they were trying to find ways to get people interested in the line again. So they came up with a special promotion campaign, like a juice set with tumblers, this French casserole, a salad bowl, spoon and fork set, and so on. But the French casseroles that you're going to find are going to be in yellow. This one is an old ivory. There are 3 of these known to exist, and this is actually the prototype. So we're going to look at the foot on the bottom. Let me move the lid. There's the base, and there's the foot. It's not marked. It has a sticker on the bottom. But there are a couple of these ivory prototypes out there that have the foot. Of course, there's another demi-tasse coffee pot. And if you are into the contemporary line, there's 2 colors here. We've got sapphire and lilac. A couple unusual pieces. The sapphire bud vase and the lilac carafe. So I was talking about Frederick Reed and his art pottery background, and we can see that in some of these prototype pieces. This predates Fiesta. This is probably 1931, 1932. Actually, that is 1931, plant number 7. And we can see all this modeling going on with these ashtrays. Here's another one by Reed with this daisy pattern on it with a 1931 back stamp. And we see something, I was talking about the streamline design versus Art Deco. This is very Art Deco, this repeated geometric design on this tumbler. This did not go into production, but we see on the bottom a Homer Laughlin mark. So this is probably early 1930s. But I just wanted to show some of these pieces up close because usually the case is not open. Probably part of a child set, again by Frederick Reed. This creamer with the monkey. You can see the little coconut and his tail wraps around. And there's the little cup. Two-pint jug. That one's also in Harlequin yellow, the brighter glaze. We'll pull this out in the back. This is the Fiesta back stamp on a saucer, but this saucer never was glazed. So when it comes to a back stamp marking, it's always stamped, and it was stamped by hand back then. Today they use machines, but back then it was all stamped by hand, and then the glaze was applied over it. Look at another ashtray. This one did go into production, but we've got a lot of Art Deco design going on here. That's Wells Art Glazes, early 1930s. Sometimes that's called a kitchen craft ashtray, but it's actually just a deco ashtray. Again, another tripod candle holder in blue. And we have another mustard in turquoise. So we'll just do a quick walkthrough over here to look at some more Reed's designs. The apple tree bowl. This is in Fiesta's green or light green. This is not a standard color for this shape. He also made some children's wear. So we have the little elephants on this. That's in green, and there's a pastel blue version there. Some more children's wear. This is actually kind of fun. There's a cat, the duck, the rabbit, the lamb, the dachshund. And here's another one with the children playing. Homer Laughlin logo on the bottom. Some more relief and modeling work done by Reed. These barrel stein mugs from 1933. Little casserole. You see that daisy embossing. We saw that on one of the ashtrays over there. It did not go into production. Experimental casserole in melon yellow. Another Reed design. More of a streamlined modern design rather than something that's Art Deco. We'll come over here and look at another experimental piece. This is called a hot water pot in blue. So some of these have been found outside the factory, and so far there have been 4 colors. The blue you see here, Fiesta Red, Old Ivory, and a Rose Ebony. It's another one of those casseroles, but this time in the pumpkin glaze or orange glaze. So that's a little bit about Fiesta and Frederick Reed's designs. Again, you're invited to come take a tour. They will resume tours in January of 2026. And you can come see some of these pieces up close and personal.
So we're remotely thanking Mark Gonzalez for his wonderful tour of the Fiesta Tableware Showroom and Factory Museum. And we did pose questions to Mark, which we're going to share with you in just a moment. And I think if you're thinking, well, I'll tune out of this because I know all this already, I think he answered some really great questions, and he even enlightened us a lot about Fiesta. So I'd suggest that you stay with us if you have a few more minutes, because it's just 10 questions that we ask him. So I think if Bill, if you want to start the video, then we will talk about the questions that we asked Mark Gonzalez for you, and then you will have his email, and you can email him directly with your own questions. So take it away, Mark Gonzalez.
Yeah, that first question, can you cite the references for studies showing that Fiesta is safe? Both the Huxford's Guide to Fiesta and the HLCCA's book on Fiesta, Harlequin, and Kitchencraft have sections devoted to that talk about the safety of Fiesta Red and how the radioactivity is not lethal. It won't kill you. Won't even make you sick. So this is question number 2. In 1951, some colors were discontinued and 4 new colors added. Don Schreckengoss was design director at this time. Was he involved in the decision-making process on the colors? Yes. But it can get a bit tricky when you're talking about the 50s colors with Fiesta and also Harlequin, because in Fiesta, they get rid of the light green, the blue, and the old ivory. They keep turquoise and yellow, and they add in 4 colors. One of them comes from Harlequin. And in Harlequin, it was called salmon, though in Fiesta, it's called rose. So now you have turquoise, yellow, and rose. The other 3 colors came from Rhythm. Rhythm was developed in 1950. It was introduced to the public in January of 1951. It came in 5 colors, and I'll show those real quick. There was Harlequin yellow. So this was an already existing color, just picked up from Harlequin and used in Rhythm. Forest green. These are Rhythm snack plates, by the way. Gray. Chartreuse. And finally, burgundy. Sometimes called maroon, but its proper name is burgundy. So with Fiesta, you have turquoise, yellow, and rose. And then from Rhythm, it picks up chartreuse, gray, and forest green. So those are your 6 colors with Fiesta. Something similar happens to Harlequin, where they keep Harlequin yellow and turquoise in the salmon color, and they pick up those same 3 glazes, chartreuse, forest green, and gray. So now Fiesta and Harlequin from the 50s have virtually identical color assortments with the exceptions of the yellow. They kept the lighter Harlequin yellow for Harlequin and the darker yellow for Fiesta. And then you have, of course, Rhythm with its 5 colors. So this did 2 things, actually. Number 1, it updated Fiesta and Harlequin by giving them more contemporary colors. So those other ones like Old Ivory and Harlequin Blue, I mean, they became rather dated by the time the 50s come around. The second thing it did, and probably more importantly, is it streamlined production. So you didn't have all these different glazes side by side. You had all these intersections with these colors. But really, when we talk about Fiesta in the 50s with respect to color, we have to look at Rhythm. And Don Schreckengoss, that was his baby. So yes, the answer is yes. I mean, Don Schreckengoss did play a role in the Fiesta colors, but somewhat indirectly. I don't know who actually made the decision to say, okay, we have Fiesta and Harlequin over here. Let's update them with these Rhythm glazes. So, question 3, in 1959, the red was brought back. Was it the same red? Was it perhaps depleted uranium? Is the level of radioactivity the same? And yes, the red was depleted, or the uranium, I should say, was depleted. From what I understand, it's a different isotope. The HLCCA book on Fiesta, Harlequin, and Kitchencraft goes into this, but they do say that the radioactivity is the same. 1959, it was restyled a Fiesta Ironstone. Actually, it's 1969. If I said 59 in the original video, I apologize. It's 1969. In 1969, it was restyled Fiesta Ironstone. Did the composition of the ceramic body change to ironstone? Was the ceramic body something else before 1969? The answer is no, it was not something else. The ironstone term was used rather loosely in the 1960s and 70s, not just by Homer Laughlin, but also TS&T, Royal China, any of the surviving potteries at that time used the word ironstone to promote durability and strength. So it's not the same as the ironstone from, let's say, the 1800s, where it actually had iron in the glaze or is very heavy, stoneware. The use of ironstone is purely just something to promote the line for durability. HLC was at one time the largest pottery in the world, and the Fiesta line had a lot of different shapes. Was that because of its popularity? How popular was it? What fraction of HLC production was Fiesta? So how popular was it? I like to answer this question by saying you can measure something's popularity based on the imitators. And there were so many of them. W.S. George had Deanna and Yorktown. TS&T had Vistosa. W.S. George had a couple lines. Payton City had Caliente. Even Homer Laughlin, in a sense, copied themselves by having Harlequin, Tango, and Riviera. So I think that's a good way to gauge popularity. What fraction of HLC production was Fiesta? So this is a nice question I like to answer, and I always refer to 1940 as a good year because that was like the height of production for the plant. And when we look at Homer Laughlin today, you go today and everything there is made Fiesta. Virtually everything. I mean, they do make a couple other products, but for the most part, everything's Fiesta. In the past, however, there were many different shapes made simultaneously. And if you look at the factory, you have plants 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, by 1929, the East Liverpool plants 1 through 3, they were gone. So let's look at 1940. You have 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. You have 5 plants. In plant number 4, those were all your solid colored dinnerware lines. So that includes Fiesta, Harlequin, Riviera, Wells Art Glazes, Serenade, Tango, Carnival, even Pastel Nautilus or Satin Pastel. So you got at least 7 products being made in one plant, plant number 4. Plant number 5 were all your eggshell lines. So that's Swing Eggshell, Georgian Eggshell, Theme Eggshell, Eggshell Nautilus, later on Andover Eggshell, and eventually Cavalier Eggshell. Plant number 6, those were devoted, plant number 6 was devoted to underglaze transfer wear, silk screen patterns, anything that had to be done under the glaze, even hand-painted work like on embossed oven serve and so on. Plant number 7 was general whiteware, so that's Empress and Quaker, Ivora. And plant number 8 was basically everything else. Anything that required a vellum glaze, that would be Wells vellum, Century vellum, Yellowstone vellum, scallop shapes such as Coronet, Virginia Rose, Marigold, and what's the other one? Republic. Also, the Tom and Jerry sets and children's sets and vellum glazes were made in plant number 8. So you have essentially 5 different potteries all operating under the umbrella of the Homer Laughlin China Company. So when we talk about what production, what percent of production was devoted to Fiesta, well, you've got 5 plants, and only one of them is producing Fiesta, plant number 4. And in plant number 4, it's just one of several lines. So we can say, less than 20% if we do the math. And in fact, in the 1940s, even in the late 30s, the eggshell lines were actually pretty dominant when it comes to sales. But each plant operated as its own pottery. Each one had its own superintendent. Each one had its own products that it made. And for the most part, everything stayed put. There was no moving around. Fiesta was never made in plant number 6, and Virginia Rose was never made in plant number 5. But once you get to 1960, that changes because plants 6 and 7 are devoted to best china or hotel ware, and then the surviving semi-vitreous lines get thrown around. Most of them go over to 4 and 5. But it's a good way to look at all these different products that they made and know which plant they were made at, and then you can fully understand, Fiesta was not just the only thing made. Virginia Rose was not the only thing made. Oven serve was not the only thing made. It was just one product in one plant. And then you start to see the full scope of the company. So on number 7, I want to address this one. What were the market conditions that made brightly colored Fiesta popular in 1936? Were bright colors popular in other types of products at the time? I don't think I'm terribly qualified to answer that because I'm not that familiar with other products, but I can talk about pottery. And if we look at Fiesta and everything that follows Fiesta, it's mainly rainbow color sets, so mix and match. Everything prior to Fiesta that was made in the Ohio River Valley was single color sets. So if you look at, let's say, Homer Laughlin, Nolan Trellis, and Old Roman, you see these yellow sets or green sets. If you look at Wells and the Wells Art Glazes, you have melon yellow, you have leaf green, French rose, and burnt sienna. Again, single color sets. These were not mixed and matched at the time. The same is true for many other pottery companies. You see these pinks, these yellows, and these greens, and they're all mimicking depression glass because they were the first ones to do that. And so the depression glass sort of gives license to the potteries that you can do these solid colored lines. But by the time you get to Fiesta, that's where you really see a lot of mixing and matching of color that we really don't see prior to that. Of course, in the California and Mexican-inspired area of California, yes, you do have that, but over on the East Coast, we don't see a lot of that. I mean, you do see some with Stengel. I will mention those because they did a lot of mixing and matching in the 20s. But it's really Fiesta that really sets that standard that many other potteries wanted to copy in mixing and matching glazes. Prior to that, it was basically single color sets. Did Frederick Reed also design Harlequin? Yes. Almost immediately after Fiesta, he starts on Harlequin as an inexpensive alternative to Fiesta for F.W. Woolworth stores. Frederick Reed was there from 1927 until his death in 1942, and I think there was about 30 shapes that he modeled or created over the years. He had three modelers that worked with him. So he would come up with the design or the idea, and the modelers would execute them. There was Al Craft, Jim Beresford, and Burt Watkin. Those were the main three modelers during his time. And yeah, about 30 different shapes. It's not just Fiesta. I know a lot of people might think that that's the only thing that's ever been made, but I mean, really, there's been so many. If you look at Homer Laughlin's complete history, starting with Cable in the 1870s and going to Gala in 2019, there's about 125 to 130 different shapes, and Fiesta is just one of them. Is the new Fiesta same ironstone as the original? No. New Fiesta, which was introduced in 1986, is a vitrified body, whereas the old Fiesta or the vintage Fiesta in the Fiesta ironstone as well, those are semi-vitreous. For those of you who don't quite know what that means, semi-vitreous ware will absorb moisture, vitrified ware will not. And the way I was taught that this test was done, you take a plate, you weigh it, then you put it in water for 24 hours. You take it out of the water, dry it off, and then you weigh it again. If that weight increases by 2%, it's said to be semi-vitreous. If that weight is close to 0, then it's vitrified. And so new Fiesta is vitrified. It's been since 1986. When I was in the East Liverpool area, this is question number 10. The new Fiesta was introduced. Can you comment on how that came about? My recollection is the restaurant found out that Homer Laughlin still had molds and ordered some for the restaurant, and the new Fiesta consumers was not long afterwards. I've never heard that. What I do know is that in October of 1984, they toyed around with reintroducing Russell Wright's American Modern, which was originally made by Steubenville Pottery from 1937 till, I believe, 1959. I think that's when Steubenville closed. I probably should have looked that up. But regardless, the factory was going to reintroduce American Modern. They modeled 5 pieces: a dinner plate, a salad plate, teacup, saucer, and a lug soup. And there was these questions with, well, do they need to get permission? Do they need to pay royalties? What did they have to do to make this line happen? And finally, someone at the factory said, we have Fiesta. Why are we bothering with this Russell Wright? When we already have Fiesta, we don't have to jump through these hoops. And that's basically how the ball got started. The ball got started? That's basically how they got the ball rolling on Fiesta. And, of course, Bloomingdale's was the principal buyer at the time. But no, I don't think a restaurant had anything to do with it. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident it was like Russell Wright. They were going to do that first, and then they changed their mind. And thankfully so. I seem to recall, let's see, some people in East Liverpool thought HLC was crazy to bring it back because they couldn't imagine why anyone would buy this old design. I think that's rather strange because people were buying the old design. They were buying vintage Fiesta. It was very popular. And I was collecting at the time, and I grew up in Newell. And I can remember when Fiesta was reintroduced, everybody was worried what was going to happen to our collections. And we'd spent all this time and money building these collections up. Were we going to have to sell it off, or what was going to happen? And then for me, I went to the outlet the day that they unveiled it at the outlet, which was in February of 1986. And when I saw the colors of rose, apricot, black, white, and cobalt, I knew that there wasn't going to be a problem. And most other collectors knew that wasn't going to be an issue. Even when turquoise was introduced, it wasn't close enough to the original to cause any concern. And there are some people who feel that vintage Fiesta has been kept alive as a collectible because of the new Fiesta. So I think that might be it. Let me look real quick. The only thing I want to add in talking about the 50s colors with rhythm, they did test rose and turquoise on rhythm. Would have been nice to have turquoise on rhythm, but they didn't go through with it. So yeah, that's it.
So thank you, everyone. I think, Bill, can you go back to that image that gives Mark Gonzalez's email for people? I don't know if you can go back to that. But anyway, I'll read it to you in case that. So it is Mark, MarkGon at live or live.com. Oh, there you have it right up there. So anyway, Mark, we're happy that Mark did this, and I'm going to thank him profusely. And we apologize for the odd format, but we knew this was worth doing and having this special recording with Mark Gonzalez talking about Fiesta and a tour of the museum for us. So thank you very much for attending, and have a good evening, everyone. Good night.